Our conversation is presented by Uber Eats. You know I love them. Get game day deals all season long on Uber Eats. All right, fresh off a week vacation, which it was a semi-vacation. I went to Montecito, which is up north of LA by about an hour and a half, and hung out with my wife for about 4 days. Then we went to Chicago, where we just were, fixing a new house. As people know, I'm moving some of my stuff there. And so most people go to sun and golf. I went into like 12 degrees, but I had a great time. I went to a Suns Bulls game Saturday night. Met Justin Isbia, the Matt Ishbia
The
owns
Suns,
the
yeah.
Phoenix Suns. Justin, his brother Ishbia, met
He's trying to
him.
buy the White Sox. He's trying to buy
Really,
the White Sox, right?
Yeah, I think he tried to make a run at the Twins. I don't, I know he likes baseball. He's got a minor league team in Nashville and a lot of business in Nashville. Could not be more down to earth. Justin Ishbia, really nice guy, invited me to a party to get welcomed into the neighborhood, and just happened to be at the Suns Bulls game. So I had a good time. I didn't go to the Sun. I'm going to do that in April on a vacation. But before we get started, the one thing I wanted to touch on with you, and it's not football, so we can ramble and talk about a bunch of stuff. So I try to kind of stay off. I watched the Nations 4 hockey stuff. I thought that was great. I mean, NHL basically said, we're going to punt on our All-Star game. Nobody likes any of these All-Star games except baseball. The rest of them are tanking. We're going to try something new. Finland, Sweden, Canada, US. It was great. It
Yeah.
was just great hockey, really intense. But it is interesting when you inject patriotism into any sport, curling, track and field, pole vaulting, it could be anything. It's jet fuel. And, Women's World Cup, basically, every time they've won a gold, there's this sense that it's going to explode and the women's soccer league is going to explode. It doesn't really happen. It's just patriotism. And there was a lot of talk during the break that I can't believe ESPN's letting go of baseball. Either can I. But what's interesting isn't that they signed the NBA. That's not interesting because the NBA's got iconic franchises. Sixers, Celtics, Lakers, Warriors, Bulls, Knicks, and it's got iconic stars. It's always been a star-driven league. Anybody that's a sports fan, even a casual, can name 12, 15 guys in the NBA right now. But what's amazing is ESPN signed hockey along with TNT to a $4.5 billion deal 7 years, a few years ago. There is no iconic franchise in at least in America. Toronto Maple Leafs and in North America are. There's no recognizable hockey star in America that could walk into a mall and everybody would freak out. Like A-Rod in his prime, or Ohtani right now, or Aaron Judge, or Bryce Harper, where everybody knows who they are. So when people get all worked up about ESPN signing an NBA deal and not a baseball deal, my take is, I get it. I would have signed a baseball deal too. I think you have to have baseball. I think it's been on a 2-year heater. The pitch clock, defensive shift eliminated, and all the stars are in New York, LA, big markets. Philadelphia, Bryce Harper, Atlanta, Acuna, like they got all their stars in the right markets. But what's amazing to me is ESPN, and Jimmy Pitaro's a huge baseball fan, says bye to baseball that's really got some 2-year momentum going, and said yes to hockey. And I know hockey fan thinks this Nations 4 thing means hockey is back. And my take is it's patriotism. Every track and field gets hot for 3 weeks every 4 years.
I'll defend hockey. I be honest. I went to my first hockey game when I moved to Arizona, and the Phoenix
Yeah.
Coyotes were playing in the college arena that had about 3,500 seats.
Yeah.
So I don't pretend to be
Yeah.
a hockey guy. I did watch it last year in the playoffs because I gambled on it, and the playoff hockey is pretty intense.
Yeah.
Uh, I,
Oh,
I
it's
would say
great.
this about 10 million people just watched that Four Nations thing. I think, like you said, the jet
Yeah.
fuel with the patriotism, but that fight that happened and the booing of the national
Yeah.
anthem, it was a perfect storm. We're always an
Yes.
underdog. How often are we? We're never underdogs in basketball, right? In the national stuff. So we're an underdog in hockey
Right.
against Canada way back in the day in Russia. They intertwined them.
They boo
Yeah,
us.
so it was easy to watch. I'll say the thing about baseball I've lived in Northern California the majority of my life, I would just have Giants games on in the background. And unlike other
Yeah.
sports like basketball, I don't watch as much anymore, but I would watch national brands play basketball, right? Like I'll watch the Lakers play basketball.
Right.
I live in Arizona. I will not watch the Diamondbacks play baseball, and they're good, but I'm not going to turn them on my TV like I would just have the Giants on a nightly basis. I don't watch any baseball anymore, and it's not because I don't like the sport. I do. I'm glued during the playoffs, but I think they
Yeah.
really struggle with beside your own team. That's where football dominates, right? You could put Jags Chargers
Yes.
on a playoff game and 30 million people are watching. That is not the case with the brands in baseball. And I just think they're in a weird point in time because they are popular in these markets. If the Giants are good, they dominate in the Bay Area. The Dodgers, huge in LA. New York, I mean, how big is baseball going to be in New York City this year with the Mets and the Yankees now? So I just think it
Yeah.
doesn't really work nationally. Like Sunday Night Baseball hasn't worked in a
Yeah.
long time. It doesn't mean the sport is not popular. And then, you talk. I don't talk basketball really anymore, and I don't
Yeah.
watch it as much as I used to. And part of it is because I just don't talk it, so I don't really care. I follow the Warriors pretty closely, and the Luka thing I would say was a little
Yeah.
jet fuel on following the Lakers and what's going on there. But they are discussed nationally on sports shows, and baseball is just not.
Well, yeah. And here's the thing that for all the NBA critics, I say this. It's inbred. I mean, basketball, we all shot a basketball. It could be in a farm on the back of a barn in Iowa. It could be in a city in Los Angeles, Rutgers Park in New York. We all played basketball. If we don't love pro basketball, we watch March Madness. We were on a high school basketball team, or we went to the high school basketball team. Like basketball is inexpensive, unlike a golf or hockey with the
Baseball is
equipment, or
expensive. I mean, you see how
football
much
because
bats cost? You talk to a parent, they have to
yes,
buy a bat.
well, or football where it kind of cancels out smaller
Yeah.
kids, right? Like basketball when you're in high school at most high schools, if you're 6'2", you're a big kid. So basketball's part of us. And I mean, it's the biggest superstar in the history of American sports is a basketball player. In Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson's top 5. So basketball's who we are. Hockey is who Canada is, and that's fine.
I don't know. I don't have kids yet, so I can't speak for the youth, but everyone my age group and older played baseball at one point in time, right? Little league,
Yeah.
through many through high school. I do think it's just lost its cultural relevancy, separate from the playoffs. Like, you always talk about college basketball is now just March Madness. I think baseball, from a national perspective, it's basically just the playoffs now.
But But think about this. Baseball runs unopposed. And if you're a sports network like ESPN, you're dying for filler in May, June, July,
Yeah.
and August. You're dying for it. That's baseball. It's tonnage. Hockey, a big chunk of its season is October, November, December, January. It's like, guys. And now with the college football playoff, December's off the board
What's your
for
take?
hockey.
Did you see Manfred's statement? I mean, clearly they're angry because they turn on. No one's ever talking about them ever. So maybe from their perspective, right or wrong, and you could argue it's wrong because their platform is still relatively big.
Right.
They were never going to discuss baseball beside putting on the games.
So my take is right now, because Otani's a Dodger, Bryce Harper a Philly, Aaron Judge a Yankee, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Acuna in
Soto hit a
Atlanta.
home run in his first at bat in spring training.
Yeah, and the Mets and the Padres, you have a lot of big market or coastal markets in baseball. The stars are in the right places. Whereas in the NBA, the stars are in the wrong places. Giannis is in Milwaukee. SGA's in Oklahoma City. Luka now is in the right spot, but Jokic is in Denver. So you have a lot of players in the NBA. Thank God for Jalen Brunson. I mean, a lot of guys in the NBA are in the wrong markets. In baseball, they're all in the perfect markets. You don't have all your stars in Cincinnati or Cleveland, and that's nothing against those cities. But I just thought for ESPN, I'm like, guys, 2 years ago, you signed a 7-year $1 billion deal on hockey. And I'm a sportscaster. I can't name 6 NHL guys, and I respect the hell out of the sport, but it's not a talking point in my industry.
I'll say this too, that and this, you got to be careful with small sample sizes. But if you come to the Scottsdale area in the month of March when spring training, I mean, the Dodgers play out where the Cardinals play in Glendale. That place,
Yes.
you can't. You're shoulder to shoulder. I mean, I'm talking thousands of people every single game. The Cubs, the Giants, who have been bad. are in the heart of Scottsdale. This thing is a cash cow for them. The amount of people that come to this area to watch spring training baseball, these are West Coast teams. I mean, this is the Padres, the Dodgers, the Giants. You feel the popularity. Again, I'm a little jaded living here right now, but baseball does feel big this time of year with all these baseball guys. It's kind of the center of the universe because in Florida, it's a little spread out, right? In baseball, it's all right here. It's some of the big brands. I mean, the Dodgers, I went to a Dodger game last year in spring training, and it felt a little bit like you were watching the 90s Bulls. It was like, this is insane how much talent is out there.
Well, and this year, they went and got the 23-year-old pitching phenom from Japan. Okay. Then they added another starter, Blake Snell. Then they went and got Tanner Scott in the bullpen. You can argue the Dodgers will have, if healthy, one of the great pitching staffs of all time. You have to go back to like the 1970 Baltimore Orioles when it was, Cuellar and I think Jim Palmer and maybe even Steve Stone. I'm dating myself, but it's just insane. It's like ace, two. It's just like stars all the way through the pitching staff. So I know we're kind of rambling here, but my point was when people were getting off on this, if I ran a sports network, there's 4 things I'd have. NFL, I'd try to have college football, at least big regular season, Big Ten or SEC, hopefully the playoffs. I'd want the World Cup for global sports, and I'd want the baseball playoffs. That's what I'd want. Those are the things. I would like to have the NBA. I would like to have the Olympics. The other thing I always throw out there is the UFC. I would love, Fox had the UFC, got into a bidding war, and they didn't want to spend $6 billion on it. They wanted to spend $3 billion. They just got outbid, and they acknowledged to this day, Eric Shanks and Dana White are good friends. We loved the UFC, but sometimes you just get outbid for stuff. So again, I am an NBA fan, but it's hard for me right now. If I ran a network, the Yankees are going nowhere. The Dodgers are stacked forever as they push those contracts down the road. The Braves are always well run. Freaking Mets have Steve Cohen. So it's like, to me, it was like, wow.
Phillies are huge spenders. The Red Sox are bouncing back. The Cubs won't be down forever.
No, the Cubs just went and got a kid named Tucker. They just went and got, they had a very good off season. I'm on my second Tito's. So, I'm just spitballing.
No, listen, I find baseball, I think both baseball and basketball struggle. Their games, a regular season game just does not feel important. I think that's a hard part for both leagues, but the difference is the basketball talking points just drive a lot of sports talk minus once football is either out of season or at different times of the year, where baseball just doesn't at all beside October. And it's kind of crazy, but it is what it is.
Kyle Tucker.
Yeah.
Kyle Tucker. I apologize. I'm moving to Chicago part-time, so I should know who Kyle Tucker is. Well, as you know by now, Fubo is my favorite way to watch live sports. NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, college sports. It's just easy to access. I can do it on my phone. I fly a lot. Boom. Headphones, Fubo. Go to FuboTV.com/Colin. Check it out. It's great. FuboTV.com/Colin. Get $50 off for 2 months of Fubo. It's great. I use it. I have for years. Easy to access, totally worth the subscription. So I want to throw this out there. So a big talking point was, again, I talked about this before vacation, then it happened during vacation, and I was told by a source I really trust that Matt Stafford's agent and the Rams are going to meet at the Combine this week and try to bang something out. The Rams like him, Matt likes him. They want to stay together. He understands the importance of McVay and Puka Nacua and the organization, and the Rams like him. And it's a bad quarterback class, and Aaron Rodgers is an option, but not a preferred option. Stafford's better now. So, but here's an interesting thing. A lot of Giants have pushed back on this. We're not giving up the number 3 pick. So my take is, would you flip picks with the Rams? Because it's different. If this was a great quarterback draft class, I'd be very reluctant to give it the number 3 pick because I could trade down, right? Which the Rams would do if they got the number 3 pick. They would trade down and get more picks. The Giants, they're not necessarily going to trade down. They're just going to draft a quarterback, or they would get Stafford so they wouldn't have to. But would you as a GM, I would have no problem getting Matt Stafford giving him a 3-year deal, maybe 4. I would draft a quarterback second year into it and just say, okay, I'll take the Rams pick late first. You get my draft top of the first. I would have no problem doing that because they've been unwatchable for a decade. The coach and the GM are on the hot seat in New York. Between Jaden Daniels and the Eagles roster, you're non-competitive. You're not a competitive team going forward. But when I say that, Giant fans are, you cannot trade the number 3 pick. There are drafts. I agree with that. You're not getting Cam Ward. This is not one of those drafts to me.
If I was a GM, I couldn't trade that valuable of a pick and pay a 37-year-old guy who does have some injury concerns at this point in time. But those guys are fighting for their jobs. So I think if you sat in Brian Daboll's shoes, he wouldn't hesitate to do that. I think he would just give the number 3 pick for Matt Stafford. Why would he not? He's going to get fired. And fair or not, like he would not get a job immediately after. And the general manager, let's also just speak in realities, would never get another job. So to me, now, if I was the owner, I could not, we would not be doing that. I think it's risky business. I would also not be in business. Look at the last 2 quarterbacks that were older, that got a lot of money, that the Packers, who are one of the best drafting teams of like all time, were like, yeah, we're done with Aaron Rodgers. And then Kevin O'Connell was like, yeah, I'm done with Kirk Cousins. And both those teams regretted those moves immediately. I mean, the Aaron Rodgers thing, well, they had to make that move. Like, I don't blame them for making that trade, the Jets, but that was a disaster. The Cousins thing was even worse because at least Rodgers at one point in time was one of the greatest players ever. Cousins always had some limitations coming off the Achilles. And let's face it, Colin, they're probably going to cut him in the next 7-10 days. He's going to get cut.
Yeah.
So now Stafford at this point in time is better than that version of Rodgers and definitely Cousins. But you know where I come with Stafford? He is going to accumulate. I looked, he made over $220 million in Detroit. His career earnings right now are about $360 million. So when his career is over, he will be over $400 million. So even after taxes and after paying agents, he will have accumulated before he's 40 years old over $200 million in net income. I'm not even talking about what he's made off the field in LA. I know I see him on Sleep Number commercials. He is really, really rich, right? At this point in time, when you spent a decade and a half almost in an irrelevant franchise and losing constantly in the peak of your powers, wouldn't you go, like, look at what Tom did? Like, wouldn't it make sense to be, hey, Sean, it doesn't get any better than the Rams. I know we're well run. I know I have an elite coach. I'm in a huge market. I have made Peyton Manning level money, and I have got my ass kicked, and we drafted in the top 10. Now I'm with a franchise who I don't even know these guys they're bringing in. All of a sudden, by midseason, they're ass kickers. Like, why would I want what I would come out? I would have stopped this conversation. I will do whatever it takes. I'm not going to make $5 million, but why wouldn't he be like, I'm making 27 this year. Let's do a 2-year deal for like 40 million, guarantee every penny. You go out and buy players. Yes. I want to be here. I'm going to go Brady. And people are like, don't count other people's money. This guy has made so much money and he played in such a bad franchise. Yeah. Shouldn't he? Like, I wouldn't want any part of the Giants if you're Matt Stafford. What are we talking about?
No.
But he likes his money. There's no doubt. Like him and Jimmy Sexton, they have been Peyton Manning like every penny, every penny, every penny. And I don't blame the Rams. Like, no more every penny, buddy.
Yeah, I think Stafford wants to stay with the Rams, and to your point, I would want to stay with the Rams. The value of Sean McVay,
and just the franchise and how well run they are now. He saw the Lions for 15 years.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of this. I think when things go public, and like Stephen A's contract went public, I always think when I see that the person actually wants to sign with the company. It goes public. I mean, and this is not a shot at Stephen A, but I always think that whenever a person, because I could make my stuff go public on my contract, and I don't. I'm not comfortable with it. But a lot of people are, and I'm not begrudging them. But Stafford and these people, that it gets out either through their agent or sources. Stuff gets out when people want it out, right? Like in my entire life, stories get out when people want it out. That's the reason stuff gets out. I've got secrets in my career in negotiations never gotten out because the company doesn't want them out and I don't want them out. This time in my negotiations, nothing gets out. I don't want it out. They don't want it out. I always tell my bosses, keep it out of the press. I don't want anything in the press. But when people do, it does get out there. It's generally because The sides want a deal. They want to remain. So when I see the Matt Stafford stuff, my take is Matt wants to stay in Los Angeles. He's got a gorgeous place near the beach in, I think, Hermosa or Manhattan Beach. It's great weather. He was in the Midwest for years. He's a Texas, Georgia kid. He probably likes warm weather. So and this is not an indictment on anybody that goes public, but this counts in politics. If you're trying to get legislation passed, it counts in contracts. It counts I mean, stuff is out when somebody is trying to create leverage, but they want to stay where they're at. So I think
I think this one's pretty clear because this kind of happened last year. It feels a little more out this year. Is that the Rams are tough to negotiate with. Early on in their tenure with Les and Sean, they signed a deal that they clearly regretted in Todd Gurley. And ever since, they've been pretty good, right? And they haven't got in these positions where, the Niners have kind of found themselves the last couple of years like, we regret that Debo deal. We regret that Ayuk deal. And now they're kind of burned, and now they're pivoting like, we got to be careful with doing that stuff. The Rams learned early on because Todd Gurley's knee just went. And this Stafford thing, right. I think they've been tough with him. He's been, with Detroit, they always bent right over and gave him, and he was always the highest paid guy. The last couple of years, it's been hard. He's like, I'm only making 27. They're like, well, we'll give you a couple $1 million more, but we're not giving you 2 years, $100 million, Matt. That's just not happening. And we want you. That's you want us. We're winning. Listen, and I know you only have a chance. Like once he leaves, he's probably not going to make, when he's 42 years old, retired, $30 million, his first job, whatever he does.
Right.
So I understand you have the opportunity to make a lot of, but he's made so much in winning. Like he could go down as a legendary player that I would be very careful about driving this hard in negotiation. Now, I think he also knows like what would the Rams do? Sean McVay, they're not really in the business of just like, we'll figure it out on the fly. Like they understand what they have, but I think they have some negotiating power because, like you said, he doesn't want to leave. Look at his options. Like the Giants or the Titans are going to trade for you. What are we talking about?
Ugh, gross. And I do think I think the Aaron Rodgers thing has some legs. And I'll say this: we know that coaching matters with quarterbacks. Last 10 games last year, when Saleh was gone, the Jets were one of the poorest coach teams in the league. They're up and down, both sides of the ball. And Aaron put up good numbers. Aaron with McVay would put up good numbers. B-plus numbers, maybe not A numbers. So I think that's something they've thought about. Aaron's got a place in Malibu, and it's like, hey, if we get trapped here, we'll bring on Aaron for a couple-year deal. Plus, Aaron, from all the indications, Aaron wanted to be a Jet and was dumped for the second time. So I think Aaron does not want to end his career like that. And again, I thought in his last 10 games, he had like a 98 passer rating. He was pretty good. So my take is, Aaron, it's not I had somebody that I really trust tell me this, that Aaron Rodgers is who McVay would go after. I mean, he went after a guy in Baker Mayfield that came with baggage. He went after him in 1 second.
Carson Wentz, they got, they've done a lot of that. He has he's like the young version of Andy Reid. They'll take on problems. The difference, though, is to me, there's a big difference as the player. Aaron Rodgers wants no part of getting hit. He just will not. And that's still a quality that Stafford will sit in there and he will get peppered as he delivers a strike.
Yep.
And that, at the level in which the Rams, they're the only team that went toe-to-toe with the Eagles. So it's like they're trying to compete for the Super Bowl. That difference in standing in there throughout the course of a season in the big games, I think there would be a drop-off unless Aaron was just willing again to play like he did, and I don't think at 41 years old he would be. That is one thing. Stafford will sit in there kind of like the old-school quarterbacks and still get hit. So I understand maybe his negotiating, like, hey, guys, I'm taking a lot of hits here too. Like I need some money for these bruises that I wake up with every Monday morning.
It's time to look at this week's tastiest matchup, brought to you by Uber Eats. Yeah, and let's not forget, let's just throw this name out there, because the combine starts this week. And before we get into that, free agencies after that. Sam Darnold had a couple of disappointing games end of the season. Sam Darnold had a really good season. Sam's got a market. Sam is still in the middle of his prime. What is your... I contend that Las Vegas and with Chip Kelly and the Colts with Shane Steichen are really good fits. Indy feels like Sam in that division can go toe-to-toe with those quarterbacks. You're not going toe-to-toe with a Herbert, I don't think, or a Mahomes. But I think you put him in the AFC South with Shane Steichen, I think he can go toe to toe with a CJ Stroud on most Sundays. What do you think happens
Yeah, I
with
mean, a
Sam?
lot changed. I remember going live with you right after he made that throw against Seattle, and I was like, this guy, how are they going to
Yep.
not give him a huge contract? And it shows you the power of these primetime games. And let's face it, there was a lot.
Yep.
Obviously the division was on the line that Sunday night, and then the playoff game was really, really bad. I still think at minimum he's going to get a Baker Mayfield 3 years, $100 million type contract, isn't
Yes.
he?
Yeah.
And clearly, with good
Yes.
coaching, you can. I mean, his team was 60 minutes away from the number one overall seed, and he played a massive role in
Right.
that. So I think you got to be careful. Yeah, I think that game exposed a little bit when he starts getting blitzed. He starts, I don't want to say seeing ghosts. He's come a long way since then, but he looked dramatically different in those 2 games than he did. But you'd also say he's, Aaron Glenn became a head coach, one of the best defensive coordinators in the league, and just was blitzing him every single play. And Sean McVay and Shula are just they had that defense rolling. I mean, they were hitting Hurts. They made him look bad in that game. They were playing good defense.
Yeah.
So I still would have no problem given. Now here's the thing, like these quarterbacks, the dominoes, all these teams looking are going to have some ranking going into the combine when they talk to the agent. So it's like, are you all in on Sam Darnold? Because if you draft or if you sign Sam Darnold to a multi-year deal, you're probably not drafting a quarterback if you're the Giants, if you're the Titans, if you're the Raiders. But if you take Cousins or Rodgers, you're probably still have no problem drafting a quarterback really high. So I think Darnold would be the one guy that would just get signed and immediately become, kind of not your long-term starter, but at least in the immediate next couple of years starter.
That was this week's Tastiest Matchup, brought to you by Uber Eats as the official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Uber Eats has the best, absolute best game day deals all season long. I use it every Sunday. Order now for game day. What do you expect? Combine starts on Thursday. Shedeur Sanders won't work out at the combine, which has become kind of a trend with quarterbacks. What are you expecting? What are you
Yeah, to
looking
me, Shador's a good example of like coming into this year, every important college director slash assistant GM saw him play live. He was such a big prospect coming into the season. There
for?
is not an
Yes.
NFL team worth their salt. And every team, once they realized we needed a quarterback, probably saw him multiple times play games. So it's
Yep.
the combine for him. And I'd even say the same thing about Cam Ward. Remember, when he transferred to Miami, he was the number one, essentially free agent in college football. I think it would go for him as well, which wouldn't shock me if he doesn't throw. Though Shador isn't, some elite prospect in terms of his qualities. Like if you're Josh Allen, you
Yeah.
should throw at the combine. Why? You're throwing 100 miles an hour. I remember Lamar Jackson when he got all the pushback about Polian's comment about the wide receiver. He's like, I'm not going to run. It's like, Lamar, you're going to run a 4.2. Everyone's head's going to turn, and you're going to be the talk of the combine. It was a mistake not running. Now, granted, it all worked out. I don't blame Shador for not throwing in this environment because it's not the best environment. If I'm Cam Ward, you have a huge arm, throw. I would. No one
Yeah.
cares about completions, incompletions. You're throwing people you don't know. Let that ball rip as all the coaches and GMs are sitting there in the boxes and in the seats right there in Indy. So I think those two guys, and a huge part of the combine is the interviews. And with a quarterback, and I would throw Jackson Dart in here, who I think is going to gain some momentum as a potential first round pick, is the person. Like, what are you like as a guy? I mean, last year, you see some of these clips, it was a pretty high level class. Jaden Daniels, really high level
Yeah.
guy. Obviously, Caleb, everyone had known him for years, and he was locked to go number one. But Drake May, Michael Penix, I mean, Bo Nix, like JJ McCarthy. So it was like they're going to crush these interviews. Coaches, this is the first, the GMs and the scouts have been watching these guys for years. The coaches, NFL coaches don't really watch as much college football as the average fan would think. The head coach might have it on.
Yeah.
Andy Reid does, but a lot of guys are just so tunnel vision. They don't know that much about these players and definitely have never met them. And a lot of times haven't really evaluated them. So this is kind of their first exposure. So meeting them as a human being and getting to know the guy and getting to know like their football smarts and their football IQ, it's a huge, huge moment for all the guys that, are in the mix to, I mean, all these guys are going to get drafted. The majority of the guys go to the combine, but definitely the guys that have like the ability to get drafted in the first round. I mean, there's just a lot of money on the line, getting drafted high.
Yeah, the combine's interesting. I think I was into it more 10 years ago, and I think some coaches feel the same way. They don't necessarily. Some go, some don't. Have you been surprised as a former NFL scout? Some of these coaching staffs just don't go
Yeah.
anymore. They just say, "I'm not going." not wasting my time. Does that
Yeah,
surprise
honestly,
you?
it's bothered me in the past because I go, well, Belichick always went. And now I'll promise you this, Andy Reid's going to be there. It's like, well, if the best guy's there and values it, it doesn't mean he goes to everything, but he values meeting the guys because there's one thing to evaluate them off a tape. Everything's taped, right? Your workout and even your
Yeah.
interviews. And some of these guys now can be there in a Zoom interview. There is a big difference if you're
Right.
interviewing someone to be the 13th overall pick, standing there and talking to him and meeting him, seeing him face to face, then zooming him. So I do believe you should go. I saw my guy Tim Kawakami in the Bay Area. Kyle Shanahan, like McVay, stopped going. Well, it's one thing when you're going to the Super Bowl or the NFC Championship every year. He reported Kyle's probably going to go this year. Kind of need to meet these guys. But my thing is,
Yeah.
like, if the top coach is there and it's Andy Reid who runs the league, like, you should be there. And so I do believe there's value, not in like your change of direction in a cone drill. Okay. But like you might draft this guy in the second round. It's kind of going to be a big deal when it's like a year in, you hate the kid, and it's your own fault when you didn't put in max effort to get to know him, to get to meet him every opportunity. I mean, at this point in time, the salary cap's almost $300 million. This is pretty big business. These are your most
Yeah.
important assets. So I do think the value is more less about the running and catching the gauntlet drill and more just sitting with the kid and interviewing him and being there
Yeah.
with your coordinators. Not every coach needs to go, but to me, the head coach and the coordinators should all be present with the scouting staff.
Who's scoring big in the NBA this season? You are. All the new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Slams, dishing the ball, cleaning the glass, get behind your favorite players. Prop bets you can make on DraftKings. It's fun. The home of NBA player props. If you're ready to place your first bet, make it really simple. Pick how many points your favorite player is going to score. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook. They have an app. Download it. Make your pick. If you're a first timer, here's something special. New DraftKings customers, all you have to do is bet $5 to get 150 in bonus bets instantly. So take it to the rack with DraftKings Sportsbook. Every point counts. Download their app. Takes 90 seconds. Use the code Colin, COLIN, to get 150 bones in bonus bets. Betting just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. You know, it's interesting. There's going to be, you can go back to last year's draft, the year before. There are certain things that are just innate. They're true. You can't argue them. There's going to be a couple players in the top 15 that will be busts. They just won't be very good. And for a variety of issues. Some, Rome Odunze is talented. He wasn't as good as I thought as a rookie. I think I thought there'd be more splash, but I think a lot of it was such a mess. Yeah. It was all a mess. And I think he'll bounce back. I'm going to throw Travis Hunter out as a player that could underachieve. So I don't doubt he's good enough to be a number 2 receiver in the NFL and a number 1 corner. I don't doubt either. But to ask to be both, if you had a great linebacker who also played tight end, it's undeniable that the physical toll would hurt what you're best at. I would put him at corner, but he wants to be a receiver. I don't know if he's a number 1 receiver in the NFL, maybe on a weaker team. He's certainly good enough, but you can't be a number 1 receiver if you have a young quarterback who's trying to get reps, confidence, and timing. It's a timing position. Running back isn't. Cornerback isn't. High school to college, college to the pros, running back and cornerback, you can walk in and just play. You could just, those are 2 positions. I've been told this forever. You would know this as a scout. Running back and cornerback. You could miss some of camp. You could be, you could have a contract holdout.
Well, it's a
You're
very
ready to play
instinctive
week
position,
1 or week 2.
both of them.
Yep. Wide receiver, especially with a young quarterback, it's a timing position. Hell, Brady was an old quarterback. If he didn't trust you'd be in the right spot, Tom would ghost you. I think Travis Hunter, this coming to a bad team, he'll have a lot of leverage, he'll play both ways. I could see that being a problem.
Well, and we'll find out. It was just a name on a paper. Did announce he's going to the combine as a corner. Now, all the top guys will be interviewed. They go to the podium. It'll be interesting if he says, I'm here as a corner, but I also plan on playing wide receiver. I do think it's fair to say most high-level people in any industry are very singular focused, and it is very difficult to spread yourself thin, especially when you're factoring in youth. I mean, he's very young. I think it's impossible to go do what he did. What he did in college was the Big 12 wasn't the SEC or the Big 10, but it was still one of the greatest athletic achievements we've ever seen, the amount of snaps he's playing. Do you agree with
Yes.
that?
Oh
But
yeah.
if you're going to be a both way corner wide receiver, just playing corner alone, think of the wide receivers right now in the NFL. The talent on a weekly basis of just pick up a random team who their schedule is on a week. You're chasing those guys for 60, 70 snaps. He would be the number one corner. And then you would try to play full time wide receiver. I think it would be borderline impossible on the body. I don't think it's, and you go back to look at Deion Sanders. I don't even think he had that many catches in his career. And this is, and Deion, I mean, was just a better prospect than, I mean, Travis Hunter's a great prospect.
Yes.
Give me a break. Deion's one of the greatest athletes in the history of America. So I do
Right.
think he just needs to focus on one of the positions, and I hope, and I think he's making the right decision right now at corner, and then he can be just a high level corner. I don't think it's possible to go both ways, and I don't think any team wants him to be. That doesn't mean you can't, a Ben Johnson type coordinator can't run a trick play for him, bring him in on offense. They
That's
used to
right.
do that with Deion when I was a kid. But like, I want you to be a lockdown corner. Derek Stingley, he's probably going to get $100 million this offseason. Why? Because he goes up against your number one wide receiver, who are all making $180 million, and locks them down. DeRivas did it. Sherman did it. You get paid a lot of money, and it's more valuable because it's harder to find. It's much easier to find a wide receiver than it is a corner. There just aren't that many. Most teams don't have one good corner, right? The teams that have two are like complete outliers in the National Football League.
Yeah.
So
Jets.
I
Yeah.
hope he stays just at one. Now we'll see. I think, Deion, who's essentially like feels like his father, constantly talks like he's going to do both ways. Like, so he's not slowing it down. And I do think Deion speaks for Travis a little bit, and Travis hasn't walked away from it. So I do think it's going to be interesting to see in Indy when he talks exactly what he says. Because if he does say like I plan on doing both, like he's telling you, like eventually you got to just listen to what he's saying and believe him.
Well, and the other thing, because I mean, we'll talk throughout free agency and the combine and the draft, and I'll do some basketball pods as well. But the other thing that is, and we talked a little bit about this last time. I can't tell you the last time a player as good as Myles Garrett was on the
Yeah.
market. I I don't even. I mean, I'm dead serious. This feels so Buffalo or Green Bay. I saw something during the break. I was on my phone and I tried to stay off it. But Warren Sharp, who does a lot of NFL stuff, had this breakdown of Josh Allen over the last several years. And it is a crime he hasn't been into a Super Bowl. He is number one in so many different analytic categories that it's a crime that he's not getting to Super Bowls. And so I do think you can keep running it back with Sean McDermott, but you're getting to a point now. You're like, okay, he's going to be coming out of his prime in about 3 years. Like, you got to get him to Super Bowls. And I look at that and I think to myself, Von Miller's getting older. What would you give up? And I know it's a non-quarterback, but I got to tell you, I would have absolutely no problem because I think they've got most of their offensive pieces in check and they've drafted well on that side. Do you give up 2 ones?
I wouldn't hesitate.
Is he
I
that
wouldn't
good?
hesitate to give. I'd give 2 ones and a 2.
I was thinking about that today on the flight. I'm like, I think it's the only defensive player outside of Aaron Donald in his prime
Yeah,
that I would give up 2.
I think they are the team. You could throw potentially the Lions, but they got Hutchinson coming back. Of like, you're right there on the doorstep. You have played the Chiefs. You're the only team in the AFC that's like, God, they could have beat them every time they played them, but they beat them in the regular season. So like you are a player or two away. And I remember when they paid Von Miller all that money, felt like a little desperate. He came off that Super Bowl run. It's like, that was pretty risky. And that blew up in their face. He just wasn't. I mean, the Rams played it perfectly.
This doesn't feel. Yeah, they did. It was the classic. Andy Reid. Somebody comes in, plays well with Mahomes, let him go. That Von Miller felt overpaid. Myles Garrett is on a short list. I mean, he's kind of entering into a Donald, Lawrence, Taylor. He may not be there yet, but Jesus,
I think
he's
I've told you
close.
this before. Looking back at historical comps, I think Reggie White, who went to the Packers at 32,
Yes.
and Reggie Myles is younger. Myles is, I think, 29 years old. But still, anytime you are trading that much to give a guy a third contract, this would be his third contract. And I don't blame the Browns. Like, I would keep hanging up, but I think you could get a pretty historic haul for a guy 29, 30 years old. And the other thing is, you got to look at his body type. It's going to age well. I mean, he's just a complete freak of nature.
Yes.
Unlike, some of the Lawrence Taylor, I don't think there are any questions off the field. No one's ever questioned like his being in shape, or I mean, every time you see him, that basketball highlight he had years ago, he looked like an NBA player. I mean, he like jumps out of pools from the deep end. I just wonder, the Browns are in a weird spot right now. They're just you got the Watson kind of contract anchoring the franchise. You're drafting 2 overall. Your star player wants out. I do think it's the right time to just blow it up. But let's face it, their owner has proven to be a little bit of, kind of a kook sometimes with the way he operates, and he gets really involved because they do have, their GM smart. He's a Roseman guy. I think we both agree Stefanski's pretty high level, good coach. But I think anything's possible anytime you get the Browns. They've even said, like, I do think they will throw, here's $150 million. And it's one thing to say, hey, I want to trade, I want out. And if someone puts $150 million guaranteed in front of Myles Garrett, like, would he re-sign with the Browns? Is this a money play? When I've seen the clips of him talking the Super Bowl, it actually felt pretty measured. Like, I actually don't think this is really, he's already super rich. Like, this is about, like, we ain't winning here, especially in this division. Against Burrow and Lamar, we have no chance. So get me the hell out of here.
And now for our next segment, Whiskey Business, brought to you by Green River Whiskey, the official whiskey of the Colin Cowherd podcast. If you want to enjoy life's simple pleasures, reach for Green River Whiskey. Whether it's rye whiskey, single barrel bourbon, you're getting over a century of craftsmanship packed into every bottle. Hop on over to greenriverwhiskey.com and discover a legend in a bottle today. I'm going to throw something at you. I was thinking about this, the way, and your life is probably a lot like this. You also do a golf pod, but for 6 months of the year, I don't take any time off. I work every day. Even Thanksgiving, day after Thanksgiving, there's tons of football games on. I've got a notepad and I'm writing notes. So, and I know it's not ditch digging. I'm not saying that, but I work every day for 6 months. And then I take 7 weeks off over the next 6 months until Labor Day. Right. And I was thinking about this, and as I was flying from Chicago to LA this afternoon, I thought about you and this question. So I don't watch Netflix or anything outside of sports from Labor Day weekend until the end of football. And then I take a week off like I just did. And then for about 6 months now, I watch a lot of Netflix, Apple TV, Amazon Prime, whatever it is. I'll watch series. So I watched 0 Day with Robert De Niro. It's okay. I thought De Niro was really good. I thought the acting was good. The plot was a little.
I'll check that out.
It's interesting. It's again, the acting's really good, and it plays. You can watch it. So like 6 episodes. But I was sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, one of the reasons, and I really think this is happening, is that events are still working. March Madness still kicks ass, gets a rating. College football games, NFL games, World Cup, Olympics, UFC, all still get great numbers. Anything Monday through Friday, baseball, NBA, hockey, MLS, really struggling. And I'm sitting there watching 0 Day. I watched it over the course of 2 or 3 days with my wife. She didn't like it as much as me. And it was, it was stuff was blowing up. It was government. It was politics. It was De Niro. I was all in. And I was thinking about this, that hockey, baseball, basketball, MLS are all struggling Monday through Friday because they're not events. And what's happened is, my take is, once football ends, our nation, its favorite sport for 6 months is Netflix. And that they'll come in for an NBA final or a World Cup or an Olympics. But football and college football, but mostly the NFL, it is a 6-month event Those Sundays and Saturdays, those are events. You go to them, you watch them, your friends watch them. Netflix doesn't do a lot of production during that time, knowing why release new stuff. Guys are checked out for 6 months. But I was sitting there watching, and baseball's regular season, basketball, hockey. Hockey's having a horrible regular season ratings. And my take is because they're competing with now the biggest off-season sport, which is Netflix. Streaming has gobbled up post-football to Labor Day a lot of these numbers. Now, I'm saying that because I'm a sportscaster and I have to watch sports. But man, when I got a week off, and if I wasn't a sportscaster, bro, I'm on streaming. I am on streaming with my wife watching shows.
Let's use me as an example. I couldn't have been a bigger sports fan as a kid through college, and even when I worked in the NFL. I love baseball, love basketball. But as this podcast has taken off and we've had success, and football is just kind of takes up my life. I don't I watch the baseball playoffs. I'm not going to talk about it, but I know it's big culturally. Other people are talking, and I want to watch it. It's fun. But I know the other games. Why would I watch when I don't have to, and no one else I feel that matters?
And you sacrifice your life with your soon-to-be wife for 6 months. You sacrifice 100%. Your life.
So we don't have Thursdays, Saturdays, Sundays, Sunday nights, Monday nights. So even during the season, during September and October, you got to give up Tuesdays and Wednesdays, right? Fridays, you can't just watch like Lakers Kings in late October when it's like, wait, are you talking about this? Right. No, I just want to watch it. I got $200 on De'Aaron Fox's over under here. That just doesn't fly. And it was much easier to do that when I was younger. I also think you just bring up Netflix. I heard on a podcast that YouTube, where it's consumed the most, is not on a phone or an iPad. It's actually on televisions. And that's obviously the youth, right? That's a lot of younger people watch YouTube on I don't view it like an app like I do Netflix or Amazon Prime, but people under 25 do. And in 10 years, those people are going to be 30 years old. And it's just the options we have to watch TV. I think about when, forever just basic cable. You would, if nothing was on TV, you would just scroll around and you'd end up on random movies. You just watch Saving Private Ryan because it was on TBS. You never scroll anymore, right? It doesn't even really exist. I don't even have, I talk about television, sports for a living. I don't have a cable box in my house. I have YouTube TV. It doesn't even exist, right? Now, granted, I go to YouTube TV and Fox Sports 1 at 9 o'clock in the morning, you come up, or CNBC or whatever. So I still have television, but it's completely different than just 5 years ago. I also think I've had this theory, for a long time, we thought the NFL was playing those London games to move the Jags to London, right? Which clearly is not true because he just spent hundreds of millions of dollars. They're going to stay in Jacksonville. At least that's what he's invested a bunch of money there. What I think, and maybe once upon a time that was the goal. I think what they've realized the last 3 or 4 years, they just announced another Brazil game going to Germany. Well, where's Netflix's audience? Worldwide. So I can sell to Netflix in 4 years when I opt out of this thing. I'm not just getting John in Arizona or Colin in Chicago or Bill in Tampa Bay. I'm getting James on an Air Force base in Germany or Craig in Australia or, some dude in Brazil that likes football. So my numbers, I'm not just beholden to the American market, which crushes in football. Yeah. I'm worldwide, baby. And I can't, obviously, through you and through the platform that you have given me, the amount of people listening to me that are like, hey, I'm from Australia, got a question about the Cowboys. Or, hey, I'm from Germany, I'm a huge Niner guy. I mean, it's not a worldwide sport like soccer, but in terms of the way Netflix, once they get involved with the NFL, it won't just be people in the States consuming the product. I mean, they just saw it. Now, it's different, the Mike Tyson, Jake Paul thing, but that got 100 million people worldwide. So I think the NFL has pivoted to these international games to grow the audience, to sell to the streamers. What do you think about that thought?
I think you're right on the money. I think
because why would they be playing in Brazil?
It's interesting.
What's the point of that?
Well, but I also think broadcast networks are attractive. For instance, when Netflix had their football game, CBS produced it. So Netflix, I still don't love Amazon's production as much as I do Fox or CBS or
I think
ABC.
Fox is I'm an NFC guy. I think Fox is the best.
Sorry to interrupt this great video, but please remember to like and subscribe. Thank you. Now back to the video. Yeah, I mean, I've worked at I've worked for NBC, I've worked for ESPN, ABC, I've worked for Fox. I think Fox's production is great. Now, I do think NBC is magical on the Olympics and deserves
Yeah.
all the love. But I think if I was Netflix, I don't want to create a sports division. I'll use Fox or CBS. I'll use their production people. I just want to buy the rights, stream it, and get eyeballs, and then I'll pay for it to be produced instead of creating 100-person remote unit or bidding for rights for the entire package. I'll take 6 games a year and I'll just use somebody else's production because I think that's what networks provide, and I don't think Netflix and Amazon are as good. Because I've known people that have moved to Amazon. I think Amazon does retail exceptionally
Yeah.
well. I think they've been clunky at the Washington Post. I think they've been clunky at Whole Foods. I don't think Whole Foods is nearly as good as it was
What's an
before
Amazon drop
Amazon
off?
bought it.
That's
I
what I
don't.
view it as. You drop off your stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't go to it anymore. So I think Amazon does retail exceptionally well. They're getting their feet wet in sports, but I think they have a long way to go to be as good as CBS, Fox,
Well,
or
what I
ABC.
think is going to happen is, and Goodell's already hinted at this, is which I'm not a huge fan of. And luckily, most of these games are irrelevant. You live on the West Coast. When they play that international morning game, sometimes it's 6:30 in the morning. It's like I got to get up to watch Titans Jags here at 6:30 a.m. But they're going to have, and Goodell's not just hinted at this. He's kind of talked about. We plan on having potentially a whole slate. Not 8 games, but like 15. Couldn't you sell that as a package like Amazon Prime, boom, to Netflix? They're all over the international, all over the world. Every single morning, starting week 2, there is a 6:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time game. And Netflix pays like Amazon out of the blue. These games would have existed anyway at like Fox or CBS, with the 11 other ones in the morning slate. You just put it as it's not a primetime game, but it's in its solo slate. It's not competing against anybody. And you sell it
Yeah.
for whatever, I don't know, 2 billion a year, right? Because wouldn't you
Yeah.
say that Thursday Night Football, the next go around, Amazon or Netflix is going to pay more than they're paying now once they're proving they get 15 million
Yeah.
people to watch every single Thursday night?
Yeah. I mean, not just because I work at Fox, I like broadcast quality production on my football games. I think they're really, really good at it. And yeah, I don't think the streamers are there yet. I thought the Paul
It didn't
Tyson
work.
fiasco was a
Yeah.
mess. It was embarrassing. Everything, the production, the fight, the marketing, none of it worked for me. I thought it was bad. So, and again, I'm a devoted Netflix watcher, but there are things, I've always been a believer. Years and years ago, when sports gambling became big. Supreme Court rules in favor of it. And, there was a lot of money being thrown around. And I had talked to a couple of the bigger players. And my take was always, I like doing business because I bet on sports. But I didn't want gambling companies to be my boss. I wanted broadcasters to be my boss because I'm a broadcaster. And if I was a podcaster, that's why the volume. We do podcast, digital media. That's our specialty. And so I think Netflix does documentaries and true crime and movies. And I don't think sports is their go-to. And the idea that, hey, we've got a lot of money, let's just throw it at sports. Now, I think Amazon's gotten much, much better on Thursday Night Football, but they still don't feel, to me, as good as the networks. And they have more money than the networks. So it's not like a resources issue. They don't quite have as good a feel for it right now. And so this idea that Netflix, I mean, I've watched some Netflix sports. They don't have a feel for it. And they're content people. Amazon's a retail giant. I mean, go look at the Washington Post fiasco. That's a mess. The grocery store stuff, it's not very good. So I am a loyalist to, and I also like, honestly, how much do we ask fans to chase around games? Can you just put them on the 10 o'clock, 1 o'clock window, West Coast or East Coast? It's 1 and 4. I mean, you're getting to a point with these fans now. I mean, sometimes with baseball, Roku, Apple, Fox, guys, you're making it hard for
Well, I think Fox and
fans.
CBS have been the only two networks that have just all the games they've had have just been on Fox and CBS. I mean, ESPN put one on ESPN Plus last year. Obviously, the Peacock thing, which again, I understand. Like, is NBC going to survive? Right, if it's not for Peacock, you big picture, right? I mean, that's CBS and Fox have been such stalwarts with the NFL for so long. I mean, they have just been hand in hand, and there's some loyalty. I mean, the NFL is not like many industries where it's management and everything's constantly the same families have owned these businesses forever. Every once in a while, they get a new owner, but the Jones family, the Hunt family, the Davis family, you just go around like the DeBartolo Yorks. I mean, the same people, the Spanos family. These people have been in for decades. The Crafts and all their kids are going to get it. So I just believe that they look at, they just create something out of nothing and be like, oh, here's an international slate. Here's $2 billion of games that we were going to throw that you and I would have had on a little box on Sunday Ticket, not even paid attention to, and they'll get $2 billion for it. Now, can this maintain forever? I don't know how long football will dominate, but it does feel like they're really in the peak of their business powers right now, right?
Yeah, but it's not even a loyalty thing. I like to be in business with people who are proficient at what they do. Like you're really good at football, right? Like I just speaking about the volume, we hire people who are YouTube specialists to handle our YouTube
Yeah.
business. Like we hire really good podcasters to do podcasts. This idea that streamers come in and they've got a feel for. I mean, Apple's baseball was
Yeah.
awful. I
I
tried
did
to
too.
watch. It was awful, and I'm not disparaging any individual. It just was bad. Roku, not good enough. So I'm sorry when I watch the networks do sports. Like for a prime example of this is the NBA deal, and ESPN, maintains its rights, and they'll do fine. And I don't love everything about their coverage, but it's consistent. Amazon and NBC take big stabs at it, and my guess is it's gonna take Amazon and NBC 2 to 3 years in this deal to figure it out,
No,
minimum.
I'm with you there. Can't.
Are you gonna go to Amazon to watch
No,
NBA? I'm
no.
not.
I mean, Colin, I don't go to ABC to watch NBA. I mean, the Warriors play the Mavs. I watched probably 10 minutes today. So no. But as anyone, that's the thing, and
No.
that is where football and its value is so strong. Like it's proven. They can throw random game on Peacock and 20 million people be pissed off and tweeting about it, but they'll still watch. I think you throw baseball and you throw basketball behind some of these paywalls, little different animal. Listen, I got involved with the Athletic right when it started. There were some people that drew a lot of revenue. Our guy Ethan Strauss, he's a cash cow. You put him behind it, people will come. A lot of people, and these people were businessmen beside it, saw you're getting no subscriptions here, and we're paying you $400,000. It was very black and white. I think baseball, like in basketball, it's going to be very eye opening. Like, how many people just watched this game? How many people just watched the Bulls played the Magic? 200,000 people watch this game. I mean, who know? I mean, they're not, you can tell me they dominate on social media. They are not going to go watch regular season random games with a lot of these brands. Even if I just put Lakers, just pick a random opponent, like Lakers, Atlanta Hawks on a streaming service next week. Relative to what it would be on ESPN or ABC behind a screen, it would get
Right.
cut. I think it would be 20% of that number. If it would be tiny. Don't you agree there?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's very difficult. I think I saw the NBA wanted to do what the NFL did, divvy it up, and it's smart business by them. But I'm just telling you, I'm going to stay watching NBA on the network I've been watching the NBA. That will be ESPN and ABC is where I will watch a majority of my NBA. Now, NFL or college football, World Cup, I'll go anywhere. UFC, I buy the cards. I go to 4 or 5. We should go to one, by the way. I
I'd
go to
love to.
4 or 5 UFC fights during the summer. Oh, they're so much fun. And then I buy 3 or 4. So I would say about 30 to 50% of the time I'm watching the UFC fights. So that gets me behind a paywall. NFL, major college football. There are some things I would pay for. I mean, a Dodger Yankee World Series, I'm going to pay for that and watch that. But if you think regular season NBA, I'm going to a streamer. You're out of
And
your
that's where
mind.
Amazon, aren't they playing a different game? Like ultimately, Netflix wants me to stay and watch other shows. Amazon wants me to order, like Maria yelling at me, we need protein bars. Boom, one button. We got protein bars delivered 10 minutes later, right? Or we need laundry detergent. Like their business is completely different than a lot of these other streamers that are just the media entity. Theirs are
Yeah.
hosting data, retail business delivering, and they are. It is really incredible what they've. You can press a button and have something delivered to your house in 20.
Amazon is the most, I mean,
I hate going to
in
the
my
store,
life,
and they have enabled me to never really have to go to the
no,
store.
Amazon is maybe the only company in my life every single family member uses. My sister lives rurally. My wife's in Chicago. I'll be there soon. Son's up in Oregon. It's the only company in my life. I mean, Microsoft was a big deal. Intel, I can name, I'm trying to think of anything comparable. Everybody, so Amazon is a retail giant. They're not a content company. Now they're pivoting to that. So Netflix, you would think because they're a content company, it would be a much easier pivot to do sports content. But I'm telling you, some of their early stuff has just not worked for me at all. And I say that as a devoted Netflix
Yeah,
consumer.
and then they're not really in the live business. All their stuff is pre-taped movies and shows, correct? So it's just people in Hollywood
Yep.
or wherever producing this stuff. I just think where they're Netflix, their money, and they're clearly dipping their toe in with the Christmas game is going to continue. I do think it's inevitable that they get just that morning package at just a number that everyone's like, you just paid
Yes.
what for 6:30 a.m. games?
I'll watch
Same.
them,
I
though, to be
know.
honest with you.
Sad.
I'll watch them. All right. John Middlekauff knocked out an hour, former NFL scout, 3 and Out podcast. Good to be back. We'll
Take it easy,
talk
Colin.
soon.